This season I am planning to grow sweet potatoes, and this is the first year in a long time that I've actually really tried to grow this crop. And I have had limited success in the past, but I never really devoted a lot of time or energy or research into how to grow these crops until the last few years. And so in this video, I just want to make sure that I am brushing up on how to grow this crop successfully so I can have a productive yield at the end of the season and not be hit with too many surprises. Ideally. Specifically, I want to try companion planting sweet potatoes with cauliflower, and I'm going to detail in this video how I am going to go about doing that. First off, I just want to share some general tips for growing sweet potatoes in general, right? So they are a tropical species, so they like the warm weather, full sun, usually about 8 to 10 hours per day, and well-drained, sandy soil is really important for their development. So usually if we can work the soil ahead of time before we plant the sweet potatoes, it can make it a lot easier to harvest the roots at the end of the season as well. Typically when we plant sweet potatoes, we plant them as slips, right? So these are little shoots that are growing off of the roots that can be harvested and rooted, and these are usually what are sent out in mail orders and stuff to farmers and growers who are going to grow sweet potatoes. So we typically don't grow them from seeds, right? But we use these slips, and that's one method we can use. We can overwinter the sweet potatoes inside and then sprout them out early in spring, and then harvest those sprouts or slips and plant those into the garden the next year. But of course, as I said, these being a tropical species, these sweet potatoes need warm temperatures, including warm soil temperatures and warm air temperatures, of course, as well. So we want to make sure that the soil temperatures are at 65 degrees or higher at night, and we want to give a buffer of space between the last frost of the season and like the generally expected last frost and when we plant these sweet potatoes, because we absolutely do not want them to get hit with frost, right? That would be really detrimental, really bad. And we want to be able to plant these plants out when nighttime air temperatures are about 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Once we plant these sweet potato slips into the ground, we want to make sure that we keep them watered consistently for the next 2 to 3 weeks, right? They may wilt over, they may not look the best, but we have to keep watering them, and they should liven right back up and then be able to grow and vine out. We just have to kind of feed them water the first few weeks so they can kind of get acclimated, put out those roots, and get established in the soil. So we have some common pests as well that cauliflower and sweet potatoes share. There may be others too, but I want to focus on these 3 today. Rodents can be a substantial challenge. They like to eat the sweet roots of the sweet potatoes, and they also like the cauliflower as well, especially earlier in the season when the cauliflower is growing and leafing out, or they may even damage heads too, or curds later on in the season. Flea beetles can also be a substantial pest. Of course, they can go after the sweet potatoes, but they can also damage most all brassica crops. And the wireworm can pose some challenges as well, right? So what can we do to kind of establish more of a sense of balance in terms of pest control and ecology on this local landscape? Right, so we do have some beneficial insects like Microplastics vittati. We also have the geochorus, or the big-eyed bugs, the nabidae, or the nabid bugs, or the damsel bugs as well. Not to be confused with the damsel fly. That's a totally different insect, but the damsel bug is a type of true bug, beneficial. And then we also have the lacewings, right? And so I have these 4 asterisks, right, in blue, because those 4 insects can actually go after the flea beetles, right? So that's why I have that asterisk. And then in terms for the wireworms, we have predatory ground beetles, which can be really beneficial. So maybe installing some type of beetle bank nearby on that landscape might give a good habitat for the ground beetles to be able to thrive in that area. We also have different beneficial nematodes. Often these are nematodes that can be purchased, like the Styronema or Heterohabditis, however you pronounce it. And those are commonly used for a bunch of different insect pests. So they are usually pretty widely available to order. And then of course we have the robber flies and birds, like songbirds, that can all work to help keep the wireworm in check. Now, will these beneficial insects assert complete control on some of these insect pests? Probably not, but that's not where my goals are. My goals are for a more functional ecosystem, or a more balanced landscape. And so that entails that there will probably be at least a low level of pest damage, but that low level is okay. It's when it reaches past a certain threshold that it's not good. And so that's what I'm striving for on my landscape, to really kind of facilitate that process, right? I'm not going for complete immunity, but I'm going for a balanced ecosystem approach, ideally. Next up, for the rodents, I have birds here listed, but these are going to be more of the raptors, right? Like hawks, owls, those types of birds, predatory birds. And then also we have some other animals that may provide some helpful pest control for the rodents, like the fox, the raccoon, skunk. Some of those might be animals that you might not think or might not immediately associate with carnivory and rodent control, but nonetheless they can have benefits, even though the raccoons and skunks may pose challenges in some regards themselves in terms of eating some produce. But it's like no one thing in nature is completely bad or completely good. There's always like a much more complex personality going on. And of course, the domesticated cat as well. If there are any feral cats roaming around, they can be a huge help with some of the rodent control. Right. So how can we attract some of these beneficials into the landscape? Well, we have different helpful plants that can help to provide shelter and a food source for these beneficials, right? So a lot of like herbs or flowering plants can do this, such as dill, which is a carrot family plant. And so that can specifically attract the lacewings and the microplastics. We have the marigold as well, which can also attract microplastics and the nabbit bug or nabbit bug. Flowering clover can attract microplastics. Goldenrod, many species of goldenrod are native to North America as well, and they can attract the big-eyed bug and the nabbit bug. Then we have the amaranth, which can be an invasive weed in some instances, but in others it can also attract the big-eyed bug again, or the geochorus. Fennel, I have sweet fennel in my garden. It always attracts a bunch of different beneficial insects, and it can also attract the big-eyed bug, the nabbit bug, and the lacewing. And then of course the dandelion and coriander, or it's also called cilantro, can attract lacewings as well. And then finally, for some of the birds, the raptors, right, older sumac trees and branches can attract raptors like owls or hawks to perch in those areas, or even it can attract, or even some of the thicker stands of the sumac can attract songbirds for a sense of shelter, protection, and hiding from some of the raptors themselves. And they can also be a good food source, a really good food source for some of the native birds like robins and catbirds, because of the berries, right? The berry clusters that the staghorn sumac produces. I know personally the catbirds would go crazy over the sumac bobs, as they're called, right? Or the sumac berry clusters. So some of these plants I may fit in to beds on either side of the bed where the sweet potatoes and the cauliflower will be grown, to give some really nice overlap for some of these beneficials to hang out and conduct their pest control operations. Finally, I want to wrap up here with just 3 general points which are really important for harvesting sweet potatoes, right? And if I do another video on growing sweet potatoes specifically, or how this whole experiment thing has worked out, I'll probably mention it again, because these 3 points are just so important. So I want to make sure that we all know these things before we actually grow the sweet potatoes, right? Because the sweet potatoes are a tropical crop, so any frost damage in the fall, right before harvest, is going to be pretty bad and detrimental. It can actually damage sweet potatoes in the ground, and it can decrease their shelf life substantially, opening them up to more rot. So we want to make sure that even though the sweet potatoes do need a pretty good length of growing season to produce and develop in size and all that, we want to make sure that we are harvesting it before any first frost of fall. We also do not want to wash the sweet potatoes after harvest to take the dirt off, because that will also substantially decrease the shelf life of these sweet potatoes for storing them over the winter time. So that dirt actually helps to work as a bit of a preservative. And then also a really important point is that not everyone knows is that it's important to cure these sweet potatoes before we store them for the winter time, right? Because otherwise, again, they're not gonna last very long. So we've gotta be able to toughen up those skins. Usually what we can do is we can put them in greenhouse or hoop house at the end of the season once they're harvested, and you know, we can cover them with like a tarp or blanket or something that's going to hold in that moisture that the sweet potatoes have in and of themselves, so they can be stored in a completely humid environment, and it can be warm in the hoop house. So if that's around 85 degrees Fahrenheit, that's really good. And we want to cure them like that for about 2 weeks. So thank you so much for checking out this video on growing sweet potatoes with cauliflower. Now I feel a little bit more confident about going out there and planting sweet potatoes so that I can set these crops along with the cauliflower up for as much success as possible, right? We know some of the common pests that both crops share and some methods we might be able to employ to mitigate some of those risks. So for me, I feel like there are a lot of opportunities to be able to get a productive yield this season and to be able to learn a lot about how these plants and insects interact with each other. All right, so thank you so much for checking out this video, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Take care.